Good morning, Bindu.
Good morning, Bindu. I think she's on mute.
Oh, this is too big of a text.
So you can go again. Yeah, that's fine. That happens. Usually you see something that says color, no? If you click on color, you can actually change the color and you can change the font.
Okay.
And so I always recommend that you maybe type in either 12 or 10 if you have a slightly bigger group. Yeah, exactly. Wonderful. Good morning, Srijit. Good morning, Bindu. So for those of you who are joining us right now, we're using the starting moments as people drizzle in to start getting to know each other a little bit, just like what we would do in a face-to-face environment. In a face-to-face environment, I would be typically walking over to you, shake your hands, well, maybe not right now, but kind of say, hello, how are you? So I've given you two options here to kind of do this in a virtual environment. One is you have the instructions on the chat where I'll kindly request you to click on your name on your video box, and there's an option that says rename. So when you click on rename, just add an adjective next to your name that kind of describes how you feel right now. You can see, for example, next to Vasant, it says alive. Next to me, it says excited. So you can just share with us one adjective, you know, of what's the mood that you're currently in. And then you can also experiment with the whiteboard where you can introduce yourself a little bit. Maybe telling us your name, you know, your role, and also where you live. So you can see, I live in Indranagar, Bangalore. And of course, if you have any issues using the technology, just let me and Vasant know, we'll guide you. But this is also a little bit of an opportunity to play around with some of the, very easy to use or engaging features of Zoom to create some connection with your participants. Oh, nice. So we have Bindu feeling awesome. Yeah, so Vasant, a lot of people don't know about the whiteboard functions, that there's actually next to, you know, this entire annotate tool.
Okay.
Which is pretty cool. And what you can see is as a presenter, I can actually take yours and move it around.
Well, all right. So we have few people joining us. So we have Srijit. Srijit, you know, heads the L&D for a multinational corporation.
Wonderful.
And we have Bindu. Bindu is a super awesome trainer again. She does a lot of sessions on live virtual platform as well.
Yeah.
And just like how you enable facilitators to facilitate virtually, Bindu does that for a lot of audience across, across geographies, I would say.
Yeah.
So today we're going to learn a lot from each other.
Wonderful. And it's great to see that Srijit and Bindu, you're muted for now. That's good. Feel free, of course, at the moment, there are not so many people yet. If you do want to ask a question, feel free to just unmute. If not, I also understand that we still have 4 minutes. So feel free to also go and grab a coffee and come back. For Srijit, it would be nice, you know, there's 2 little activities that we've put into place as a little bit of an engagement. So feel free to follow the instructions on the whiteboard and the instructions in the chat to start engaging with us. And we have someone else who just joined. Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning. How are you?
Good, good.
That's Parmeshwaran Seshan.
Yeah, it's a long name. Even after 16 years of living in India, those are the kind of names that I usually don't even attempt to pronounce before someone else has done it.
Yeah, you can call me Param.
And you know, I'm married to an Indian, so you know, like I have a lot of Indian family members, and some of them have very, very long names as well.
Yeah.
But Param, if you want, you can also join us and engage in two little get to know each other activities. There's one activity on the whiteboard where we just ask you to introduce yourself a little bit with your name, maybe your role and your location where you're based. There's also the thing that we ask you to do. You can see next to my name, Basant's name, Divya's name, and Bindu's name, you can see an adjective. So we ask you to add an adjective next to your name describing how you feel right now. So just a nice little bit of a different way of connecting with people as they enter the virtual environment. And for those of you who are not currently talking, do maybe mute yourself. It always helps to kind of reduce background noise, but at any given point, feel free to unmute if you would like to say something.
Oh, we got Fred Fireflies joining us.
Wonderful. I think not yet on the audio.
Okay, so that's a tool which helps us, you know, make notes of the entire meeting or the engagement. That is a tool called Fireflies.
Ah. Okay, have a lot of people entering. Good morning. So we have lots of people who just entered. Pavitra, Harshita, lots of other people. So everyone who's just, you know, entering right now, a very warm welcome. And do feel free to start engaging with us, just like in a face-to-face environment. What we would be doing as people enter the room, we would say hi to each other, maybe even shake hands, even though right now that's not recommended. We would maybe exchange a few little words with each other. So today, given the fact that this is a virtual environment, we're going to do this a little bit different. Also giving an opportunity to play around with some of the Zoom functionalities. So two little welcome activities for all of you as you join. Activity one is explained on the chat. So what we'd like you to do is to click on your name next to your video or your name box. And you can see that in that there's an option that says rename. And we would like you to just add an adjective next to your name that kind of describes how you feel right now. So that we kind of know a little bit more about the mood that you're currently in. So for example, we know that Vasant is alive, Divya is curious, I'm excited. So feel free to add an adjective next to your name. And the other thing is use the whiteboard to introduce yourself. Instead of using the chat, I'm a big fan of using the whiteboard for introductions because we see everything in one place afterwards. So you can, on the whiteboard, share with us your name, your role, and maybe the location that you're based. For those of you who've never used the whiteboard, you just have to go on your screen. You should see something that says, Melanie is sharing her screen. If you click on the right side of that, you see something called options. And if you look in that scroll down menu, you see annotate. Annotate gives you access to a whole bunch of text tools. So you can click on text and then you can actually write. Bindu is actually using, very interesting, you're using the drawer. So you're writing in your handwriting. I love it. So there's no right or wrong in this. Just make it colorful, the whiteboard.
Yeah.
You can also change the font, so you can play around a little bit. The annotation toolbar has a lot of different options. You can change color that you write in, the font size. Yeah, very nice. So feel free, you know, to just keep adding to it. It's not the best whiteboard. There's many tools out there which are much nicer, but I opted today just to use everything within Zoom to keep it simple. And since this is an introduction session and not kind of, you know, overwhelm you guys. And you can see as a host and facilitator, I can actually move things around so that we don't write over each other. So that's the cool thing about being the, you know, okay. Wonderful. So we'll just, Vasant, I would suggest we wait a couple of more minutes until about 10:05 for the room to fill up.
Sure.
Wonderful.
Till then, you know, probably, you know, Melanie, you could tell all of us about you and what you do, so we get to know.
We'll do that. You can also Google me, by the way, and I'll talk more about that. I always give the recommendation, you know, in virtual environments, especially in short session, keep your introductions very short, because people actually today, they can really, we talked about that, no? They can actually stalk you on LinkedIn, on Facebook, on all these wonderful tools. But I will, of course, say a few things. You can also see I introduced myself as well. I'm the director of a company called The Learning Gym that specializes in upskilling learning professionals. So all we do is different train-the-trainers and learning and development programs. And I'm originally from Switzerland, but I live in Bangalore. I've moved to Bangalore 16 years ago. So I'm locally married to a guy from Mysore. I got married in Mysore in a true South Indian wedding. And I'm the proud, happy mom of an 8-month-old baby that I'm so grateful to have right now, especially during lockdown period, because I just never got bored. I mean, you know, it's like the days just go by like this, man, between work and household chores and playing with the little one. Before you realize it, the day is over. So wonderful. I see a lot of you are using the whiteboard. If you have any issues using it, you know, do unmute yourself, ask us the question so that we can help you. I mean, today is not a technical program. For those, we have different sessions, but of course we try and answer some of those things as well, because technology is a big worry for many people. I can see that some of you have not yet done the second little welcome activity. Feel free on your name. You can see on your video box where you have your name. If you click on that, there's a menu that says rename. Click on rename and add a little adjective next to your name that describes how you feel right now. Especially in the virtual environment where not everyone is using cameras. I personally really like asking people to write something next to their name, how they feel, because like this, I can tell, you know, in the face-to-face environment, you can see on the face of someone what's going on. But in the virtual environment, some of those nonverbal clues are missing. So I just really like then playing around with some of this technology. Okay. Good. So how many people do we have, Vasant? I'm going to go for your kind of guidance by when we should start.
So we've got 15 participants, including all of us. I guess, you know, we're good to go. Let's not, you know, make everybody wait. Shall we? Yep.
Wonderful. Great. So then, thank you very much for those of you who've joined. I'm going to leave the whiteboard just for a couple of more minutes open as we establish a few little ground rules. So for those of you who've just joined, feel free to add to the whiteboard a quick introduction. I already shared with some of you, but just for the benefits of those of you who've just joined now, I always like to start off my virtual sessions, you know, with a few little get to know each other activities. In a face-to-face environment, this is so easy. You walk over to someone, you shake hands, you say hi. In a virtual environment, it's just a little bit more complex. And if everyone is unmuted and talks, it can become a little bit chaotic, especially in short sessions. If I do have a 2-day, 3-day longer journey, then yes, I would definitely go into giving everyone an opportunity to introduce themselves over audio. But in such a 45 to 60-minute session, I think technology makes it easier for us to just do a quick round using, for example, the chat or the whiteboard. I'm a big fan of using the whiteboard to do it, just because like this, we have all introductions in one place and not scattered over the, you know, the chat. So, and as I said, the other thing I like to do is, because I cannot see everyone, and also in a virtual environment, and especially in places where bandwidth can be an issue, sometimes we do recommend that people actually take off their videos so that, you know, it doesn't eat so much bandwidth. And in that case, I cannot really see how people are feeling right now. I like to ask people to just add an adjective next to their name, and they can keep changing this throughout the session. And it's kind of another way of letting the facilitator know how are they feeling right now. So it's another way of kind of, you know, engaging when you don't see each other. Yeah. So someone has not been able to find the menu to use the whiteboard, where to find it. So I'm just going to quickly once more explain that. And then I'll be also happy to take some of those technical questions later on so that we then get moving. Typically, you should find the whiteboard function next on the top of your screen. There should be something that says Melanie is sharing her screen right now. Next to that, there should be a menu that says options. And if you click on that and look down in the scroll down, you should typically something that's called annotate. When you click on annotate, yeah, that's when you get you get this entire toolbox of things that you can write. So you can have, you then get the text tool, you get, you can draw stuff. So you have this entire whiteboard function. Yeah? Great, but with that, I'm gonna close this and we're just gonna jump right in, yeah? So let me, Vasant, would you like to just say a few words from your side, since you are the one who hosted this session and set it up, before I get started?
Sure, thank you. Good morning, everybody. Looks like a wonderful Saturday. We are at our home. We are safe and sound. I managed to get Melanie for a session. Now, this session is going to be wonderful, interesting, and exciting. Melanie and I spoke about it. So I'm not going to say anything about the session, but this session is going to be you know, a gateway to all of us and help us learn from each other. So Melanie is going to take charge now and let us know of how virtual facilitation could be done better. We are doing great. She is going to, you know, help us understand how we could do it better. And we can learn from each other as well in this session. That's the objective. Thank you. Over to you, Melanie.
Wonderful. So great. The way, what we call this session is climbing the remote training mountain. And this is really, you know, I want to be very clear. It's a 1-hour introduction session in a very holistic way, looking at some of the best practices that we've gathered from doing virtual trainings for the past 10 to 12 years. Just a couple of quick words about myself and maybe what qualifies me to be here before we jump right into another activity. I already shared with a few of you, I'm originally from Switzerland, but now live in Bangalore. I'm the founder and co-director of a company called The Learning Gym, specializing in upskilling learning professionals. We run a variety of train-the-trainer programs around diagnostic, design, facilitation, and also evaluation. But as I told Vasant as well, I think today it's very easy for everyone to find out more about me by going on LinkedIn, Facebook, or any other social social media. So feel free to go and stalk me, connect with me if you want to know more about who I am and what I do. Since we have such a short session today, I don't want to, you know, do too much about myself, but really get right into the session. And what I'd like to do is to actually start straight away with a little activity. This is an activity that we do a lot in the face-to-face environment. And again, what I've learned in 10, 12 years of doing virtual trainings, with a little bit of creativity, with a little bit of passion, and a little bit of a you can do it attitude, a lot of things that work face-to-face actually work virtual as well. So I'm not only going to talk about what works virtually, I'm also going to give you an opportunity to experience it. Unfortunately, given the short time, some of the activities, we just do them in a shorter version, more as a teaser and taster, but just for you to get a little bit of an idea. And what we're going to do is, can you all now see 6 quotes on your screen? And you can just give me a thumbs up. There's some non-verbal tools, either using your video or also just kind of clicking on one of the non-verbal icons, or even just in the chat, letting me know if you can see it, just making sure that the technology works. Can everyone see the 6 quotes on the screen? Perfect. So what I'd like you to do is quickly read through those quotes and then choose the one that you feel right now resonates the most with you. Yeah. Okay, so you only see the whiteboard. Okay, let me quickly get that rectified. Okay, let's see. Let's close the whiteboard for everyone so that it should not be an issue anymore. Let's try again, because sometimes Zoom, depending on what you have configured, doesn't allow for everyone to see it. Can now everyone see my screen with the quotes? And just, you can also show me a thumbs up on the video. Perfect. So for those of you who can see it, what I'd like you to do right now is to read through those quotes and select the one that resonates the most with you. Using the chat feature of Zoom, tell us which quote resonates the most with you and why. So I'm just going to give you a couple of minutes, yeah, to go through this. And this is really just a little bit of an icebreaker activity connected to our topic. And of course, it's a little bit for me as a facilitator to gauge people's feelings and expectations and current mood about this entire topic of remote virtual facilitation. So this time now, use the chat function. And in the chat, tell us which quote resonates the most with you. And also maybe a little bit more about why that resonates the most with you. Share it with everyone over the chat. And we'll just give this a couple of minutes to see. Okay, interesting. Loads of different selections. And now, of course, in a face-to-face environment, you know, you would maybe get everyone to talk about this with each other. And if you had longer time in your session, you could actually call on everyone and make this an introduction activity for people to share. Yeah. Manoj, for example, thank you so much, kind of shares. He talked about quote number 1, because technology is not your forte, but also 5, that kind of, you know, you like to experiment. So very nice. So I'm going to give maybe the option to one person or 2 of you to just quickly share with us 1 or 2 thoughts about some of those quotes. So feel free to now raise your hand, indicating to me that you would like to say something, and you can unmute yourself and just for a couple of minutes, but very briefly, maybe just 1 or 2 people share with us, why did you choose the quote you did? Do we have anyone who would like to say a few words? I see a lot of them still typing, and that's fine as well. Okay. So we have people, some of them also very, you know, excited about this. I share that as well. I love experimenting with new tools. I typically actually use Adobe Connect, but today decided to try out Zoom because everyone is talking about it. So Zoom is actually pretty new to me as well. So I thought I'm going to put myself into a learner shoe as well and experiment with it. Kind of, you know, just trying out new things. Great. Thank you so much. So this, by the way, just a very simple activity to get things started. We use this activity on so many different topics. You know, you could have a leadership program and you just put up some quotes around leadership. You can have a program on negotiation skills and you put up, you know, quotes on negotiation skills. All it does is, instead of you making the introduction, you bring in some stimulation and you start getting people engaged in the topic, you start getting them to talk about it, start realizing how they feel about it. So, since this is just a taster, I'm just going to move on. Today is really just giving you loads of little nuggets to get you to think about virtual remote training maybe a little bit different. And as you can see, all I did is I took the posters that I would typically hang up in my face-to-face environment, took a photo of them and put them onto my PowerPoint. Yeah? Wonderful. So let's continue and just see a little bit more, you know, where we stand. So pretty much one thing that I want to get out of the room before we go deeper into today's session. All of you have shared now with us before a little bit how you feel about remote virtual training. Some of you a little scared because of the technology, some of you pretty experienced. There's all kinds of different feelings around it. One thing that I really would like to stress, if you want to be successful in taking your face-to-face virtual, there's one thing that you really need to get rid of. And this is a quote that is from the pre-work article that I shared with you. A lot of people look at virtual training as kind of the poor distant cousin of the face-to-face training. And I think if you view it like this, there's going to be a mental barrier to really enjoy what you do. And I think for those of you who facilitate trainings, you know that having passion for what you do and passion for training is one of the key ingredients in being successful. So try and embrace it as something new, as something that, yes, might be challenging, but actually, hopefully by the end of the session, you will also see it actually has some pretty cool advantages over face-to-face. It's not as black and white. So just some food for thought as we get started. What am I going to give you today? It's a very, very short session, but what I hope I'm going to give you today is a little bit of a helicopter view, first of all. A helicopter view of strategically thinking about how do you move from face-to-face to virtual? What are some of the big picture considerations? Then I hope to give you a few puzzle pieces, a few simple tips, both for designing, but also facilitating virtual training. And also very important, I hope I'm going to charge a little bit of your batteries. Maybe they're not going to be full, but recharge your batteries a little bit. I think it's tough for most of us to be stuck at home right now. So I hope you leave this session pretty energized with at least some ideas of getting you started on this journey. Please remember, it's a little warm-up session. This is not a full fitness program on how to become a master in designing and facilitating remote trainings. I am pretty sure there's going to be loads of questions left after this. I'll be sticking around for as long as you want. I'll share my email with you. I'm happy to connect afterwards. This is really just a small little taster. At any given point, feel free to ask questions over the chat. We'll keep doing activities as well. I will try my best to answer as many questions as possible, but please don't be angry with me if I say I'm going to just park that question for later so that we can just cover the content holistically and then deal with some of your individual questions in a more structured way. Everyone today stands at a different level, has a different fitness level. when it comes to remote trainings. So I'm going to try and give an overview and then handle some of your individual needs in a more one-on-one basis. Wonderful. So one last thing that I would like to get out of the way before we jump then right into a little activity. What are we actually talking about today? When you look at what most of us are doing and how that translates into the online equivalent, I realize that sometimes there's a little bit of confusion out there between meeting, webcasts, webinars, you know, and virtual instructor-led training. Today, my focus, what I'm going to talk about is training. A method of improving someone's performance centered on learning objectives. I'm not going to share tips with you on how to do webcasts or webinars. We are talking about taking face-to-face training, which is typically aimed at a slightly smaller group of people where you're building skills, be it technical, functional, or behavioral, and how can you move that into a virtual instructor-led format. This does not mean that webinars and webcasts are not a good thing to do, but that's a different discussion. I just want to be clear about this. The format that I'm using today, though, is more of a webinar because it's a very short session, which is a little bit more one way on where I'm educating you on a certain topic. However, I'm trying to bring in best practices from my training through some of the activities that you're going to experience, just to make sure that we have a shared understanding. Good. So this is it. Let's get started. Moving your face-to-face sessions online. How are you going to get started? Or where are you right now? What I want to show you that we realize that typically the people we work with, the clients that we engage with, the people we coach, there's typically 3 possible scenarios that they are faced, especially right now because of COVID-19. Some of us are in a situation that we call the right now scenario, which means you had something planned for tomorrow, a face-to-face session, and bam, you need to switch it into a virtual environment. Somehow it's a compliance training maybe, or the schedule is already fixed. You cannot change it. There's no real time to design a lot. You just have to go out there and do it. Some of us, and I think that's what's now becoming a little bit more common, are in a near-term scenario, which means you have maybe something planned in a couple of weeks. It's happening soon. So it means you have some time to think about how to best do it. Or some of us are maybe starting to think more strategically of making virtual training an integral part of our business for the long-term success. So it's not that we have anything planned right now or in the near future, but we want to look at strategically how can we move some of our trainings, you know, into a virtual environment. Now, I'd like to do a quick poll and get you to share with us what is the most common scenario that you are right now in. So right now, you should be able to see a poll on your screen, and you should be able to vote and tell us what is your current situation. And by the way, you can click on as many options as you want because we know the world is not black and white. Some of you might have a mix of this. Okay, I'm going to give you a couple of more moments to vote. And by the way, of course, you're now experiencing another very simple to use tool in a virtual environment, the poll, that allows you to quickly get answers, check people's understanding. Okay. Okay, great. So I'm gonna end it. Most of you have voted. And I'm gonna show you the results. So what you can see is that we have some of you who are in a right now scenario, which is pretty hectic. I get it. And I'll give you straight away some ideas on how to do that. We actually have a majority of you who say you're more in the near term scenario, meaning that you have some time to maybe think about how to do it. But there's also quite a few of you, and that's great, in the long term scenario. Yeah. So I'm gonna click this away and give you some ideas on what to do. Now, this is not the only way, it's just a few little pointers. So first of all, if you are in the right now scenario, my recommendation to you as an approach is just take care of the hygiene factors, keep it simple, buckle up and just go for it. You know, just take a deep breath, just go for it. There's not much you can do if you just have to convert it. I was in a situation like this a couple of days ago as well, where with one of our massive clients, we had rolled out a performance assessment program because the company had undergone a change in their performance assessment. 10,000 people globally were already trained, but we had failed to train another 1,000 because of the lockdown globally. Now, we could not train those 1,000 people, and it had to happen fast. So you know what? We did a dirty workaround. It wasn't a great training, but it worked. We used Skype for Business because that was the only platform the client allowed us to use. We had no video. We just had audio showing them the slides, and we just talked about it and used the chat for some interaction. Was it a perfect training? No. Did it meet its objective of getting people ready and updated on the performance assessment process? Yes, it did. So be aware, sometimes that's just what you have to do. On the other hand, those of you who have the luxury to be in the near-term scenario, I think this is cool because this means you have enough time to learn and maybe use some more ambitious virtual delivery functionalities. Think about it a little bit more. Look at your design and take maybe some of the advice that I'm going to share now in the subsequent slides. And of course, those of you who are in the long-term scenario, well, you really have the jackpot because that means you can really think about how to best do this. Long-term scenario means you could look at a very nice blended learning journey of strategically thinking about what parts of your program are you going to do live in the session like today, or are there things that you want to do online through e-learning, are there things to a pre-work and so forth. You can really go very creative in designing a very holistic solution. So I'm just going to quickly pause here before we then jump in to some of the real tips. Any questions right now around those scenarios? I think this is really crucial to understand because you got to be fair to yourself. Depending on what scenario you're in, there's only that much you can do. So, any questions, any reactions? Feel free to unmute and maybe share a few of your thoughts around this strategic thinking here. Okay, I can see someone unmuted. Feel free to share. Unfortunately, your line is very rattled, so we are not able to hear. Okay, so feel free to share over the chat any reactions. If not, we'll move on because like this, we'll straight away get into a little activity where you're going to get to talk. Yeah. So then let me move on. Let me share with you, and I'm going to do this as a little bit of a quiz. I'd like each of you to maybe think about, yeah. I have identified over the years of working with different people 3 very common conversion mistakes that people make as they move their programs from face-to-face to virtual. What have you come across? What do you think some of the typical conversion mistakes are as people try to move from face-to-face to virtual? let's just open the chat for a moment and see whether you have some ideas from your side before I share mine. Okay, wonderful. Not taking, yeah, some great ideas, not taking into consideration the change in the mode of delivery. Yeah, absolutely. Not motivated, expecting to wing it. Yeah. Number of hours not possible. Wonderful, great. So, I mean, you really identified a lot of them. So let me just, and there's not much that I'm going to have to say about it. But let me see. And by the way, I'm going to apologize, but my Zoom is right now bugging. So I'm going to try again to give you access so that you can see it. And that is sometimes, unfortunately, a little bit of the issue. I don't need to say much because you've actually come up with them. 3 common mistakes that we see. Mistake number 1 is taking an interactive instructor-led classroom session and turning it into a presentation style webcast. Why does this happen? Well, because it's just the easiest to use the slides that you have and do away with all the activities. Mistake number 2 is that actually thinking that an 8-hour instructor-led class will be an 8-hour live online virtual session. But the reality is that 1 minute of classroom does not always equal 1 minute of virtual training. Some things are actually faster virtual, for example, introductions. Other things are longer. So you actually really need to, convert it in a different way. And mistake number 3 is that people unintentionally inflate the number of participants in the live online class. Not because you can put 100 people in an online class should you actually do this. Remember, if you put 100 people, you're probably not in a training anymore. You're probably more in a webcast or in a webinar. So just something to think about. Wonderful. Now what we're going to do is we're going to get you now a little bit differently involved. And what we are going to do is we are going to move you into another cool feature that actually is possible to do in the virtual environment. In a classroom environment, we make a lot of use of group work. Why not do this in the virtual environment? So what we're going to do is, in a moment, is we are going to send you off into a breakout group. And what I'd like you to do is, for a couple of minutes in your little group, is to talk about the pre-work that we have sent to you. We have shared with you a little article that talked about some best practices of designing and facilitating virtual training. Share that with each other, but maybe also share some of your own advice before I then summarize it from our side. So what we're going to do is you're going to be about 4 to 5 people, and you're going to be there for a couple of minutes. And what you will see is at one point, we will then come and get you back. Yeah. So what's going to happen is you will get a little message on your screen. That means you need to accept the invitation to go into the breakout group. And then you have a couple of minutes there time to discuss with each other your best practices for designing and facilitating virtual training. At one point, you will see a countdown telling you that you have 60 seconds time before you come back to the main audio. Okay, have fun. Yeah.
Hello.
And this is magic. I love being Harry Potter, and everyone should be back. Can you just give me a quick thumbs up or on the chat confirming that you're back? Wonderful. And of course, I'm very sorry. I know this was short, but again, remember, we have a very short session today. So I'm trying, unlike in other 45 to 60-minute sessions where we would not be using breakout rooms, I just wanted you to experience it and at least see it once. Yeah, wonderful. So let me just hear maybe from one or two of you, and I actually put up a slide from my side with some of our top 5 design tips, and I'll let you quickly read through them, and maybe some of you can unmute yourself and share with us, did you discuss some similar things, especially right now focused on design? We'll get to delivery in a moment. Or did you come up with very different design ideas? Curious to hear from some of you.
Melanie, we've been using, these options that you've mentioned, polls, chats, whiteboards, because these are the only tools and techniques for us to make sure that engagement happens at a decent level. But I'll be more keen to know some of the games and activities that you've mentioned. Are there, games and activities out there on the web where we can, leverage?
Yeah.
It would be great if you can, share with us some of those resources that will help us enhance the quality of our session.
So we actually do this. It's a separate course. So that's actually one of our key offerings where we run in our full program, we actually run a course on interactive games for the virtual environment. So this is really aimed at people with a certain experience already in the virtual world of how to kind of take it to the next level. One of the activities is, for example, the quote connect that we did, but then we actually use one of them at the end of this session. So if you bear with me for the next 5-10 minutes, we should get there in a moment to at least experience one other innovative tool. I will be happy to send a few of them to all of you afterwards. There's quite a few of them that we use, yes. But they're very specific to different types of training. And again, we don't really use them in a 45 or 60-minute session. Those are really for our trainings. But great question, Pavi. What about some of the others in terms of your own design tips that you discussed in your breakout room? Anyone has something to share? Or if you look at the tips that I've shared here, 5 of them, which are pretty self-explanatory, any of them that jump to your eyes, any questions around them, anything that puzzles you about them?
Melanie, what we discussed in our breakout room was more around the importance of engaging the audience, because the possibility of distraction is much more in the virtual scenario. So ensuring that every 10 minutes, and this was something that Srijit also shared, that ensuring that every 10 minutes we have at least some interactions or, some kind of a game or interaction with people that will help us keep things on track.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, we actually also say it's almost every 3 minutes that you just do a small thing, even if it's a show of hands, if it's, a quick chat or something, you need to make sure of that. Absolutely. However, careful, I always say, about just adding games for the sake of games. They need to fulfill a purpose. There's a lot of very bad virtual training out there, which is overusing a lot of the functions that you can. And actually, sometimes the real learning happens in the most simplest tools. For example, we do a lot of role playing over video and audio. You don't need anything besides that, just video and audio. Sometimes there's a lot of fancy tools out there and people struggle using them, and more time is spent on the tool than the actual training of the content. So careful about finding the right balance there as well. Wonderful.
Sure.
So I'm going to let this stand here, in terms of you can read this, and I'll be happy to share this slide with you as well. I don't believe I have to reread what's written here. Everyone can see it. However, I just want to point out a few things in more detail here. And the first thing is, you know, in terms of tip number 2 that we talk about, here's just a very quick little summary of some of the most common features that most of your different technologies will offer. Again, I don't have to explain them, but again, what I like about this slide is it actually tells you what to use it for. So ask yourself, what's the purpose of this activity? You know, what are you trying to achieve? And then decide on the tool. I see a lot of people making the mistake of selecting the tool and then trying to match it to their content. It should be the other way around. Ask yourself, what level of interaction do I want? Do you want to encourage dialogue? Okay, use the chat. Do you want to facilitate a small group discussion? Use the breakout room, you know? So it's a little bit about this. Manoj, how do you do material distribution in a virtual world? It's your blended approach. So you would send it beforehand, or you can also use other technology that integrates. You can share Google Docs, you can screen share, and you can make stuff available like this. But I'm a big fan of making things available beforehand so that you can give people time for reflection. You can get them to do, you know, you can play some background music and you can get them to do a little self-assessment, for example, on a sheet of paper. Making use of some of these things instead of reinventing the wheel. Yeah?
I have one question. Is it okay?
Yeah, absolutely, Manoj.
See, suppose there is a kind of an activity where I have to, let's take Pavi and I are doing a role play.
Yeah.
I give a particular role to Pavi with an instruction.
Yeah.
And I take a particular role myself. Pavi doesn't know what I have, and I don't know what Pavi has. How do I give such an instruction online?
So there are different ways, and I'll be happy to send you a document that we've created about sharing instructions online. So again, we get into the very specific things. I'm a big fan of visualizing and sending instructions beforehand. So that people actually have it ready. So I very much make use of the blended approach of distributing things beforehand. Yeah, and visualizing. Now, certain technologies allow you to paste, and even in the breakout rooms to have instructions available. One big drawback of Zoom, for example, is that in the breakout room, you don't really have instructions. But maybe you saw that I kept sending you messages in your breakout room, so you can keep sending instructions over the breakout room feature. So there are different workarounds around it. But happy to have a separate conversation with you on that specific thing. I know there's so many questions that people can have around this. And I told Vasant, you know, 45 minutes, even 60 is just really short to even give a little bit of a feeling and trying to at least make it a little bit of interaction. You know, if I would just present this to you, it's maybe 30 minutes. But using a poll, a little bit of chatting, activities and breakout, I hope you can bear with us. We should though be done in the next 5-6 minutes, and then I'll stick around for some more Q&As. Yeah? And again, I'll send this to you, but here really my key message is ask yourself what's the purpose of the activity and then match it with the function. Sometimes less is more. Yeah, I see a lot of overusing too many different tools. It just makes it complex and it makes it difficult from a technology perspective. It can also be overwhelming to your learners. Keep in mind how comfortable your learners are with the technology as well. You might actually first have to train them on the technology. Yeah, so that you can use the more advanced features. Very briefly, just one thing, because a lot of people like this, and I think it is one of the key advantages of of virtual training is the blended learning approach. So here, for example, you know, a 4-hour traditional instructor-led face-to-face training class, the virtual format actually allows you to transform that into a blended structure. So you could, for example, have some pre-work assignment, you know, some reading material or a little assessment Then you have maybe a 90-minute virtual face-to-face session in that sense, where you're interacting with each other, a live session, which really serves the purpose of discussing the material, practicing skills, giving feedback and engaging. And then you couple that with post-work. And by the way, even for today's tiny little taster session, we are using this format. I send you a little pre-work reading article that you now discussed in your breakout room. And I'm actually going to send you some additional tips tomorrow or Monday about what we discussed today. So I think the blended approach is the key beauty of going virtual. It's the key advantage. Yeah? Great. So then let me just get to our last point before we do a little bit of a wrap-up activity, getting to Pavi's point about maybe a more creative activity in the virtual environment. In your breakout room, I also asked you to discuss a little bit about best practices around delivery. So let me pause again and ask you guys, what did you discuss? Some of you already have a lot of experience in delivering virtual, sessions. What are some of your own tips when it comes to being a good virtual facilitator? Feel free to unmute and share a few thoughts with us, or use the chat as well.
Melanie, like you rightly mentioned, being mindful of the duration is one, and two, making sure that particular duration that you've decided on is meaningful for the learners.
Yeah.
Now, how do you make it meaningful is to make sure that you chunk the content in the right way, keeping in mind the interest level and using the hook strategy where you, after you've chunked it, placing the right activities and making sure that there is a right balance when it comes to content sharing as well as receiving the response, just like the way you're doing right now, Melanie.
Absolutely.
So chunking and involving activities, interactive, activities.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you so much, Pam. And that's, of course, again, a very important design consideration. Anyone has some specific thoughts around facilitating, even reflecting on your own experience of attending virtual trainings? What are some cool things that you saw other facilitators do to make virtual delivery really impactful? Harshita, you have raised your hand, so I'll be happy to pass it over to you. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Melanie. One of the things which I feel is, when we are putting people in an online mode, the non-verbal, the way we look at, the way we sound on the screen becomes extremely important, because that's going to be the length of, the concentration is going to depend on that as well. So being very, very mindful of how we are modulating our voice, how can we continue to stay concise for being precise is important. Because nobody wants to keep listening to, us speaking for a very long piece of time. And I also use this even for my classroom training, because facilitation is about engaging them to talk, and as much as possible reduce the content at our end.
Absolutely. And Harshita, you just said it's so beautiful, and you gave me a very nice segue to sum this up. And again, please, bear with us. This is really a taster. I know we are not going into all the details. It's just to give you some bigger ideas what to think about. We've categorized it into 3 aspects, and I see some more people have raised their hand. So feel free to quickly unmute yourself before I sum this up and we get into our closing activity, being mindful of the time.
Yeah, hi, Melanie. I just have an observation to share.
Absolutely.
Regarding the slides that we're using for virtual training, I feel that some of the last couple of slides that you've used with infographics and nicely well-placed designs work really well with the audience. And some of the earlier slides, like they were a little content heavy. So can you just briefly summarize as to how the slides should be designed, and what kind of slides should actually work with a larger audience?
So I'm so happy that you said that, because that would actually have, it was very intentional. So I would have used that at the end to sum it up. I've given you loads of different variety of slides to exactly experience it as a learner. I believe the best way to learn about what works is to actually attend many, many different sessions and see yourself reacting to it. You said it yourself. I do think more visual stuff works much better instead of content heavy. I've done this on purpose on some of the earlier slides to have a lot more text so that you actually now see the difference and you can actually develop a best practice for yourself. So I would say like a slide that you see right now with an infographic or an image and just a very brief bullet point is a lot better suited. Does that make sense?
Yeah, sure. Thank you so much.
Wonderful. So let me just quickly sum this up. And, you know, I know that we could go on and on and on. You can see it's even I, you know, and I'm very honest, we've never done this session in such a short format. This is typically a 90-minute. I already chunked a lot of stuff out, but I still wanted to create some engagement. And you can see we go over time. That is the difficulty of virtual training as you see it happening right live here. But just to sum this up, I think for us, there are three major things to consider from a delivery perspective. And guess what? They're no different than in face-to-face. Just like in face-to-face, you need to make sure that you enter the room early. In a face-to-face, you go into your room early on to make sure everything is set up nicely. Well, in the virtual environment, it means you have to do a solid tech check and plan for a backup. Maybe have a second producer along with you, someone who could take up in case your technology fails you. You want to check that your video works, your audio works. Log on early to check everything. Just like in the face-to-face environment, when you want to walk over to people and shake hands and welcome them, right at the start of your virtual session, welcome people, engage them straight away in some sort of activity, like I did with you today, using the whiteboard or adding, you know, something, an adjective to their name, talking to them over the chat, use something early on. And then most important, you know, be a true facilitator and not just a presenter. Especially if it's a training, try to reduce the amount of time that you speak. All the information that you can deliver, think about making it available beforehand so that you really use the actual training session for dialogue, asking, you know, discussing questions, practicing and so forth. People can read information by themselves. They don't really need you to actually explain that. So that's just a little bit of a summary from our side. Yeah. So one thing that I like to sum this up with before I get you into your little activity, I hope that you will like, and then we open it up to Q&A. One thing for me that is really crucial, no matter what you do, besides all these design and delivery tips, it comes down to one thing for me, and that's your mindset. Keep in mind that technology keeps changing, and yes, it can bug. I've never had a single virtual session where everything went as per plan. Don't panic. Don't panic. Talk about it, laugh about it, go with the flow. That's really a tip that Matthew Richter, a dear friend of mine from the Tyagi group, has shared with me. And I think it's really what I try to take as my mantra. It might not be perfect, but that's okay. Give yourself a breather. You're doing the best you can. Talk to people about that, but be aware that, yeah, the technology is not always fully in your hand. So with that, let's just sum it up. So what I'd like you to do is one of my favorite activities. And if I can ask you to take a sheet of paper, take a pen, and take 1 minute to, on that sheet of paper, write down either one word, one sentence, or draw a symbol, capturing your key takeaway from this little taster session today. Once you're done, turn on your camera and show us the sheet of paper, summarizing our key message from this session. So take a sheet of paper, take a pen or a marker, quickly take a moment to summarize a key takeaway for yourself, and then put it into your camera, show it to us so that Vasant can take a nice photo of it and we have a capturing of the key message from today. Whenever you're ready, feel free to turn on your camera and just show us your little sheet of paper. Either it's a symbol or it's maybe a little word or a sentence summarizing your key takeaway. Okay, are we ready? And just try to hold it as close, yeah, to the so that people can see.
Melanie, I just got logged out. Looks like you'll have to click the picture.
Okay, I will do that.
Logged in
No
from my
problem.
phone now.
Yeah, no problem. Okay, if everyone can turn on their camera. Cleona, Srijit, Vidya, Fred, Vasant, we can see you now.
I'm from my phone now.
Yeah, no problem. Alok, RJ, Tarshal, Vidya, if it does work, it would be awesome if you can turn on your camera and just show us your symbol. And as I talk about this is, by the way, an activity we love to learn, love to use. We typically try to recommend that people use a marker. It's a very simple thing, just one word to sum it up, but you can use it at different times of your session, even just to kind of have people share something, pick up a prop. Okay, so we still have a few missing.
Okay, something like this.
Your cameras are off. Cleona, Srijit, Alok, Harshal, Arjit.
Okay, I'm getting a message that unable to connect the camera from Zoom.
Oh, okay, no problem, yeah. And that's okay, you will have that. You do with what you have, so you can see each other's little message. And this is one way that we usually like to sum it up. We also like to sometimes use this activity as an introduction. It just kind of adds a little bit of a different interaction. People going back to something more tangible and kinesthetic, which can be quite nice. So with that, I know we went a little bit over time. I do apologize for that. As I said, this was the first time for us as well to do this session in such a short format. And I learned as well, we need to cut out even more, even though we chunked it already so much. But as a final message to you, what I'd like you to embrace and take away is understand that it doesn't have to be perfect. The non-perfect is actually the new perfect in the virtual world.
Suggest some external tools, external from Zoom, which we can use in Zoom for more interaction. So for example, for one of my sessions, I used Kahoot for the quizzing, but any other thing that you would suggest, something that I might not be aware and we can do a best practice?
Yeah. So there's a lot of them. So we like to use tools like Mural, which allows you to do a lot of brainstorming.
Design thinking, yeah. Okay.
These kind of things, Mural or Miro. There's also something called group maps, which allows you to work on activities together. Group map is another one. What I can do is I will share with Vasant a list of some of the tools, and then actually have an article around that from a friend that you can use and refer to. However, Bindu, what I'd like you to be aware of is that while the tools are very cool, each tool that you add to a virtual training adds a technology complexity to it.
Absolutely. Yep.
And it leads to more bugging sometimes, and especially some participants, you could see it now. Even a simple thing like using a camera is not possible for everyone.
True.
So the thing is, you gotta be ready for all of this. You know, like you could see in the beginning when I used the whiteboard, not everyone could use it. So what you observe today is I then went into a little bit more of a lecture in the beginning, getting some of the points across while I actually had planned other activities. But I realized that not everyone is able to use technology. And in a 45-minute session, 60 minutes, I don't have the time to teach you the technology.
True.
So that's a little bit of the challenge, you know. So I know I would have liked to have more engagement today, but the fact that everyone is at a different technological ability level makes it really hard.
True.
So if you have a closed group of people that you know beforehand, my advice is do a technology dry run with everyone before the actual session, making sure that people are comfortable using the technology that you use.
Yeah, that's true. And having like 2-3 backup activities just in case it doesn't work. Yeah, absolutely. With
I think this is extremely crucial, because if not, you might just, you know, it might just not work. And then some people are left out.
True.
You know, that's crucial. So, you know, then sometimes just using audio is actually better and chat.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I'll send you a summary overview of some of the tools.
Sure, that will be very helpful.
Yeah.
Have you used Mural for virtual sessions?
I've used Mural for virtual sessions, yes, in combination with Zoom. But again, I had some people really struggling getting access to it, and then the bandwidth of having 2 applications open. So I'm very honest with you. I very much love one specific tool, and that's called Adobe Connect.
Okay.
It's expensive, but it has everything integrated. It's one technology, a one shop for everything. It has amazing whiteboards, breakout rooms. It has amazing chatbots. So, you know, you can have you can do a World Cafe on Adobe Connect. I think it's an absolutely fascinating tool.
Let me explore.
But unfortunately, it's damn expensive.
Okay, let me figure out.
Yeah. The big advantage
so the whiteboarding is. So a lot of times in Zoom, you know, whenever I use whiteboard, I'm not able to move people's writings. I don't know, what is it about the setting?
It's in your settings. So you have to go into your settings and enable that. Yeah. To be honest, I'm very honest with you. I'm not a big fan of Zoom. The more I use it, the more limiting I find it is. So for example, we also tested this today because we did this session over the order training account, and Vasant made me a host. But for example, I can share this with you. I could not see the chat throughout the session. Whenever I was sharing my screen, the chat disappeared.
Yeah, it doesn't come. Yeah. And
which
then the mute all button.
Yeah.
Yes, and in Zoom, the mute all button also gets hidden if you open too many windows. So I face those challenges. So you're saying Adobe Connect is much better?
Adobe Connect is a platform that allows you to preset everything, you pre-program.
Okay.
And it has everything in it. Everything is integrated, yeah.
Oh, cool. Okay, let me just
and the big advantage is it's secure. So the problem with Zoom that we have, a lot of our big corporates don't allow us to use Zoom because it doesn't meet their security standards.
And it's the same web-based, a simple tool like Zoom. So it's web-based. People can have to download it.
Adobe, it's from the Adobe suite. So you get a link and then it's on your desktop. So it's you get a login, and but you don't need to install it now.
Okay, cool. That's a good takeaway.
Yeah. Let me just quickly check, Bindu, and I love chatting with you. We can continue, but I see some other people still in the session.
Oh,
so I just want to make sure they also get a chance to ask questions, or if they have any of them. And if not, you can go back to your questions. I can see Divya, Srijit, Cleona, Arjit, Alok, Param, Gunjan, you guys are still here. Do you have any other comments or questions?
I'm good, Melanie. Thank you so much for the session. I'm just here to just see what other questions.
Okay, perfect.
That,
Yeah, wonderful. Any other questions from anyone?
No, I think Melanie, this session was great, really useful. So, so nice of you to share your insights. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Pam, for sharing. And I know, it was really just a mini thing. And this is an open thing. So everyone has different questions and needs and different levels of experience. What we try to do is just to give a little bit more of a helicopter view and for you to experience a few things. Yeah, my key message is really just try it out, go out there and get started. The only way to learn it is to get started.
So Melanie, some of the participants are still there, especially Param. Param happens to be a very, seasoned and, highly experienced technical trainer.
Yeah.
So his sessions, unlike ours, they actually have a lot of knowledge download.
Yeah.
So, Param would have actually had some challenges, or maybe he would have some inputs to share it with us as well, basis his experience. So Param, I think learning never ends, and we could also hear some inputs from you. It'll be great if you could share some inputs from your side as well.
Yeah, sure. One of the key things that I have faced, in the last many years, is challenges with the technologies. So there were situations where we have used WebEx, and many of the participants, couldn't even install the WebEx client on their desktop. Some of them couldn't even use it on the browser. And then we had to, change the platform. We had to change it to something like Zoom, which is, a bit more minimalistic, a bit more light on the system. So WebEx, we found that was too heavy on the system. It was eating a lot of resources, from the system. So when we switched to Zoom, it helped a bit. Then we had a bit of struggle, with people sometimes connecting from homes, because not everyone has good internet connectivity. Now, I'm not talking about India. I'm talking about, people in Canada, people in other parts of North America, some people, in Australia, so we can't assume that, if they are in the Western world, people would still have better connectivity. So there is no guarantee, and especially nowadays, everyone is working from home. So there are challenges with connectivity. So what I would do is to have a dry run before the real program happens. So I would request them to spare about 20 minutes, just test it out. So
exactly.
I send an invite for the test session.
Yeah.
And, not everybody makes it, due to whatever reasons, but at least some of them do make it. And then we do a test. And once you're comfortable, then we go ahead with the main program. Second learning, as you said, too many functions, if we use from the platforms, it can be complicated. It can get really complicated for the participants. So I would rather prefer to use simpler functions, functionalities, and which can actually help everyone get involved. And I would rather do away with all those complicated stuff. So I use breakout rooms, but not regularly, because some of the participants have challenges, with breakout rooms. So I use it occasionally. I use chat a lot. So I ask them to type all their questions using chat window, because sometimes people find it easier to just type, so I ask them to do that. And I keep asking questions, all through the session. So I know that people can get distracted, and sometimes you cannot see what the other person is doing on the other side. So not everybody turns the video on. So what I request them, to do is every 10 minutes, I keep asking them questions and I ask them to answer those questions. I call people's names.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And when I call their names, they just suddenly, become awake. And then they, even if they were less attentive, now they are forced to, respond, right?
Yeah.
And sometimes that helps in getting the engagement. So these are some of the things that I have done. And of course, technology is much better now. So I remember using GoToMeeting, many years ago, some 7-8 years ago, and it was very primitive. But now with Microsoft Teams and Zoom, you have a lot of technology options, and things are much better. Still technology is an unknown factor in this whole game. So you never know, if something will not work. So it's best to test it out before the class.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. And it's, I always say as well, sometimes less is more, just as I said, I just had to do this session for one of our clients, and we had to use Skype for Business. And as a guest, I could not even have control over the PowerPoint or anything. And we just limited it to audio and chat. Yep. But we actually had a lot of engagement because people knew chat is the only way. And so they actually engaged there. And every slide I would pause and see any questions, any comments. I would call people by their names. And I think actually that's sometimes the best, and
right.
I've attended sessions last week where 5-6 different technologies were used, and I was just so lost, and none of the activities work because for each activity, at least one person could not connect.
Right.
And then we spend, in a 10-minute activity, 8 minutes figuring out the technology. Right. I mean, I did this on purpose today. You had today some of the key features of breakout, poll, and whiteboard, just to see for yourself, whether you actually are comfortable in it, how easy it is or not, so that you can make a better decision.
Exactly. And one of the things that we found in today's breakout session, is that some of the folks in the group, they had no clue what to do. Even I didn't have much clue of what we were supposed to do, right? So that's where, the instructions that we send before the session help. So if we send the instructions beforehand and then just remind them to take a look at that and then get into the breakout session, that helps. Yeah. Otherwise, people just get confused and then they waste those 5 minutes.
Yeah. And even, and you can see, I even sent you a message with the instruction, but some people don't even see that because they are not used to it.
Right.
So again, I actually also, told my son, but typically when we do these public sessions where we don't even really know who's coming, it's a mix of people. I actually believe in this, the webinar format works much better of really just using chat. But here the objective is also to get you to experience everything, because you can then learn through your experience and realize what the challenges are. And you're right, I mean, at the end of the day, what I said is you need to prepare your learners for the experience.
Right. Exactly. And I also feel that if the number of participants is large, it's better to go into a webinar kind of a mode, because you cannot interact with all these people, right? Yeah. So it might be good if in some cases you might want to have a large number of participants, if it's a corporate program and they want to cover different regions. So you might want to make it a webinar and share a lot of material beforehand. Let people ask you questions after the program. Let them send you emails with questions. So I think all those things might help.
Yeah, to just be really clear, because then if you do a 2.5 hour, that's when you have the time to do a lot of the activities. Right. Everything takes time, like as you said, giving the instructions, putting people into a breakout, getting them back, debriefing, bam, time is gone.
Exactly. Just to give you another insight, I'm going to run another instructor-led, live virtual program in the coming week. It starts on Tuesday, and this is for a corporation. Now, many of them have been asked to use Microsoft Teams. I have been asked to use Microsoft Teams. It's their own platform for doing this. Now, when I checked with some of the participants offline, they told me that they had no clue about Microsoft Teams. They just got to know about Microsoft Teams a day or two before. And then I said, okay, let's do a test run. And I asked all of them to participate in the test run. And then of course they had to struggle a bit, but then now they got a hang of it, and then we are good to go. Because the customer was not comfortable with Zoom, as you said. They had, they fear some security, issues. So they are going with Microsoft Teams, and then I had to prime these guys to become familiar with it. So
yeah, that's what I meant. It's one thing is your preparation, but the other thing is actually making sure your learners are prepared and technologically ready. Yeah.
Right.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much for your time and insights.
Thank you, Param, for yours as well.
Sure.
Oh, and Param, was it you who asked that? What? No, it was not you, no? About the blended learning?
No, that was
that
not
was
me.
No, that was Pavi. Yeah, I need to get back to her. Just remembered. All of a sudden, the names like PPP could be the same.
Right. So just a personal question, Melanie. Where are you from, Switzerland? Which city do you?
In Basel.
Oh, Basel. Okay,
yeah.
Okay. I like Switzerland for one key thing. That's Roger Federer. So I'm a big fan of Roger Federer.
Ah, he's from the same village. Yeah, he's from the same town. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Okay. So we still have some more participants. For example, we have Meghna and we have Gunjan.
I think Gunjan left. That's what she said. But I can see she's still here. But she had said bye.
Okay.
But yeah, you're right. She's still here.
Yes. So we got Gunjan and Meghna. If you have any questions or any suggestions, inputs, please feel free to share with us. Okay.
I'm still here. Nothing to
Okay.
Okay, yeah, Gunjan is saying, yeah, I'm still here, noting the little nuggets shared. So Gunjan, what was your favorite nugget? Just out of curiosity. What nugget did you take away? I always like the word nugget as well. Ah, look, we get to see and hear you. Wonderful.
Hey, Melanie.
Hey, Gunjan.
So the nuggets, so a couple of things that was shared is that, something that we all realize as trainers is that we may be very well versed with technology, but we are not sure about our participants.
Yeah.
And that has always been our case. Even back in my office, we used to often struggle. And a lot of times what also happens is that our trainees, they may be well versed with technology, but they may not have a good internet connection.
Yeah.
So I have often struggled with this, and what has helped is to completely simplify. So what Param just recently shared, that simplify it as much as possible.
Yeah.
That has helped me big time. So we have blended it so much that we use simple functions or simple apps which everybody knows, something as simple as WhatsApp.
Yeah.
So we pre-form groups in our WhatsApps before we start with the session. And while the session is going on, at side by side, we also ask them to get into their WhatsApp groups for discussions, because a lot of times they struggle with good bandwidth. So we keep all the audios or the videos off. I'm sorry. Yeah. And we just keep the audios on and ask them to get on to their WhatsApp and continue over there, and then get back on Zoom or probably Google Hangouts. So yes, oftentimes when you are doing stuff like this, you feel left out. That everybody is using so big hi-fi technology, and you're using something so simple. So when people like us on such forums, when we discuss that yes, it's okay to simplify, it's like it's like a sounding board for me that yes, it's absolutely okay to simplify.
Absolutely.
And that's great for me.
It is. I mean, I really, and I personally, some of my best virtual trainings were really just on audio and chats, and then maybe at the end, I show sometimes my photo in the beginning of my video, and then I turn it off because there's no need. And as you said, using WhatsApp. I've done a lot, especially when people struggle with breakout rooms, getting them to just chat on the WhatsApp because people are more comfortable with that.
Absolutely.
I do feel that's one thing that's actually working quite well on Zoom is the breakout, because you have full control as a facilitator.
Yes.
Putting people there. So it's very rare that someone does not get placed in the breakout. So I do find breakout rooms very easy with Zoom compared to, for example, other technologies.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it's really about just keeping it as simple as possible. And I've attended so many sessions the last few weeks with all these really fancy tools. And in the end, as I said, we were just more busy trying to use those tools, and the learning was lost.
Absolutely. So it's like, you were running behind, achieving the whole objective of your training, but you'll end up missing it completely and just get stuck in the frills.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And one more thing which I learned today was using a poll which you used. I wasn't aware of that. I've been using Zoom since quite a long time now.
Yeah.
I wasn't aware of the poll format. So I'll probably start using that henceforth. So thank you very much.
Welcome. Well, that's actually a very simple one. I like the poll because you can actually set them up beforehand, and it's very fast.
Yep.
The whiteboard is much longer. And also when you have a larger group, getting people to share ideas over the chat is much more hectic. Whereas the poll, if you can do small tests with the poll, you can just ask for opinion, So, I mean, of course, it's closed-ended. It's not as open-ended, but especially in technical training where you're teaching certain things, you can do your test. All your tests can actually be done over polls.
True, and whiteboard has also helped me, especially when I have to take inputs from my participants and I want to put it up for everybody to see. So that helps me engage all my visual learners also.
Absolutely, yeah.
So the whiteboard has a completely different function when you want to take inputs from others. So I ask them to share and then I put it up. I also engage into a lot of one-on-one trainings. So in these one-on-one trainings, whiteboard has been a blessing. So.
Yeah. And Gunjan, what I said as well, like I typically in a 45-60-minute session, I would never recommend using all the tools we did today.
Absolutely, it's an overload.
It's an overload, but it was about experiencing it to actually reach that conclusion, showing the bads and the goods. So to really see all of it. I mean, typically in a 45 to 60 minutes, I think talking and maybe a poll and the chat is absolutely enough.
Absolutely, yes.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Melanie, for today's session. I remember you kept saying that time is too limited. However, in this limited time, you've made good use of the time and you've shared a lot with us. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Gunjan, for your feedback. Thank you.
So I am still here if anybody else is sharing, and then I'll log off.
Yeah. Okay. So let me just check with Meghna, maybe. Is Meghna still here?
I can see her online, but
I can see her online, absolutely, but she's muted.
All right, so Melanie, how about we have one more question from anyone? So maybe if others are not having any question, maybe I will ask a question because I've been a trainer myself. So one thing that I noticed during our discussions also is that we decided to go without a co-facilitator.
Yeah.
And most of these suggestions that you hear across the globe is that if you're running a virtual session, be it a webinar, webcast, or a live instructor-led program, go with a co-facilitator who assists you.
Yeah.
But here, intentionally, you took charge, you handled chat, you handled responses, questions, polls, everything. So I would like to hear from you. How can you run a session like a one man or a one woman army compared to a session wherein you are accompanied by a co-facilitator?
As I said, I mean, I told you that yesterday, this was very last minute and the time, it just didn't suit my two colleagues, today to be here. And then sometimes, this was kind of like, this approach that we talked about. It's the right now approach. So you just got to buckle up and do it.
Absolutely.
You know, I mean, we decided on this super last minute. As I said, we've never really done any of, exactly like this. So we just tried it out. And sometimes you just have to do that and learn from it, and, but I would always say, have a co-facilitator, especially because like in my case, I could not see the chat. So I could not actually comment on it, which felt very limiting. It felt very, very limiting because I had to keep going out of my screen share to see the chat. So,
Yes.
so that means I could not interact as much as I wanted. And ideally, if you have a co-facilitator who can manage the chat, that is so much better.
Absolutely.
So for me, it just confirmed it. Afterwards, we just don't live in a perfect world. Like the other option would have been to just tell you, Vasant, I'm not doing it today. It's not possible. And, and so sometimes you just have to buckle up and do it. And as I said, the not so perfect is the new perfect.
Absolutely.
So I think, as long as everyone still gets one thing that they can take away, and even for us, we said, this is a dry run, we try it out. And I think, I've told you as well, I do think it's very ambitious to do something like this in 45 minutes. So of course I had a double agenda here as well. I wanted to show you how hard it is to do in 45 minutes if you really want to create more engagement. And if you really want to address more topics, you need to extend this to at least a 2-hour thing where you can really do solid breakout discussions, debriefs, and share some very concrete advice.
Absolutely. I mean, I totally agree with you. I have personally experienced it through a facilitator as well as being a facilitator. So back in my previous organization, when I was with Dale Carnegie, we would have live instructor-led sessions wherein people from all geographies log in, around 20 participants. And we would always ensure that the session is between 3 to 4 hours. Anything less than not even 90 minutes, because you got to make them speak.
Yeah.
You got to give them activities.
Yeah.
You got to make it interesting, not just touch and go.
And
So
you could see that, but
you.
how do you do that in 45, 60 minutes, And so we went to 60 minutes. Of course, we started only at 10:10. So you lose time with that, with technology and stuff. And the moment you want to engage people, it takes more time.
It does.
So, so I mean, I always say, like, if it's skill building, a little bit of skill building, 2 to 2.5 hours is probably what you need.
Yes.
And in such a webinar, like this is more of a webinar taster thing, I would go for 90 minutes and have, about 60 to 75 minutes of collaboration, of, doing this entire program at a slower pace. So we can have a little bit more time for, involvement and getting people to speak up. And then 15 minutes for Q&A at the end. And I think then you have a good format.
Absolutely, yes. Well, that's about it from my side as well. I believe, let us not hold all the participants now. So with your permission and your call, you can end the session as many of you like. Yeah.
I will.
Thank you, Param.
And what I will do is,
bye everyone. Thank you.
What I will do, everyone, you're going to get a little bit of a summary sheet from Vasant. Yeah. So I'll send something to you that you can share with people, Vasant.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely, Melanie.
Okay. Thank you so much. Bye, Gunjan. Bye, Meghna. Bye, Divya.
Thank you, Melanie. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye, Vasant.
Take care.
Bye, Melanie. Thank you.
Bye-bye. Thank you.